I don't want to be 100% better than my competition at one thing. I want to be 1% better than my competition at 100 things.
Where you started, but where you sort of ended up?
I was selling a lot of communication technologies. Leadership isn't about going in and doing it for them. It's stepping back and helping individuals get to a place that they can't get to on their own.
What was the pivot point for you to decide that leadership wasn't for you?
You got to slow down to speed up. Credibility, capability, call to action. That's where your champions are. Best reps are consistently investing in themselves. Technology translator to solve the business pain. Top 1%. They're consistent, they're predictable.
Could you imagine getting into another industry?
I thought, let's pivot and actually move into SaaS. Am I learning and am I earning?
Do you think you'd be the leader you are today without doing that though?
Most certainly not.
Chris McPherson, welcome to Double Triple Tech Sales Podcast.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you here today and spend an hour with us to chat about your career and the leadership stuff that you've gone through in the tech sales journey. But I think if someone looks at your LinkedIn profile, and especially, I mentioned to some people, we've got to have Chris on to give the fans what they want, but I think I'm your biggest fan in terms of what you've done in your career. And would love, I guess, you to start with your journey and what you where you started, but where you sort of ended up in your current role today, and then we can kind of go down that roadmap and rabbit holes from there.
Yeah, sure. So started my career in infrastructure sales as a BDR back in 2011. End of 2011, I was 21 years old, placed by a recruiter, pro-grad. And at the time, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I'd done a marketing degree at Macquarie University. I'd done a gap year playing some cricket overseas and came back and I was like, okay, what do I think I'm good at? I'm decent at communication. I can go into a room and break down barriers and break the ice with a lot of people. So I thought, okay, sales makes sense. I'll get into that. But only once you get into that journey do you realize that sales isn't necessarily just having a chat to someone, and it's all around, a methodical process to actually understand, hey, this business has a challenge. Do I have a commercial product that can solve against that challenge? Can I build champions and groundswell in an account to get it from point A to point B? Can I build a compelling value statement to, get this company to buy into your vision? And so it was a big learning curve. Mm-hmm. But as a BDR, I just got in there, hit the phones, worked on my outbound, got my confidence up, and I was really just setting meetings for the first kind of 6 months of my career. And then I had the opportunity to move into an AE role. And then as soon as I moved into like an AE role, that's when the rubber met the road. It wasn't kind of this theory-based role anymore. It wasn't about understanding, what a methodology was. It was putting it into practice. And so I worked at a company called West. I was selling a technology called WebEx, which still kind of sits around these days. I was selling the precursor to Zoom. It was a technology called Blue Jeans. And I was selling essentially a lot of kind of communication technologies. And I was quite good at it. Mm-hmm. And for 3 or 4 years, I kind of moved up the ranks from mid-market sales to commercial to enterprise seller. And after about 5 years at that company, I was given the opportunity to move into leadership. And I was promoted from my peers. And at the time, I was promoted because I was probably seen as the highest performing rep at the time. Senior leadership saw me as someone with great potential. And I moved into that role thinking, yeah, that's the logical next step in anything that you do in your career. But candidly, I failed in that role. And it wasn't failure from a performance perspective. We made President's Club. A lot of the team qualified for it. Performance was fantastic. I think we hit 270% in my first year of leadership. But for me, I struggled to create an environment of trust, mutual accountability with people that I'd be promoted from within peers, within my organisation.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the trickiest pivot point for me at that time.
Yeah, super interesting. I think when you always kind of go, what I hear about when people go from IC to leadership, it's like almost are you doing the job of the reps, or it's like if you weren't there for 2 weeks, how's the trust and the accountability for them to operate autonomously? And because you did do so well during that period, like you crushed quota as an IC, then you were 2 years as the regional director there as the manager. What was the pivot point for you to even decide that potentially leadership wasn't for you, or to almost like leave that?
Because I couldn't create this mutual accountability within the team, I felt myself not coaching, but carrying the team. And I don't want that to sound over egotistical, but I was doing the majority of the work for these individuals because, one, they knew they could get away with it. Two, I wasn't mature enough to realize that leadership isn't about, going in and doing it for them. It's stepping back and helping individuals get to a place that they can't get to on their own. And once you have that moment of realization, that's when you realize that, hey, leadership is for me or it's not for me. And I was young. I was, I'm in my late 30s now, but this is going back 11, 12 years
30s.
ago, right? Yeah, I was
Yeah.
26, 27, and at that point in my career, I just wasn't mature enough to step into that role and do it really comfortably. And it wasn't something that I think, when I look back at it now, that I was nearly ready for. And I had that moment after 2 years of this just isn't for me. I'm burning out. I want to become a subject matter expert in all of the areas that I had kind of breezed through. And I do a lot of kind of mentoring and coaching now in my new leadership role. 10 years later, I had to reset and go through it again. But I always say to individuals, you got to slow down to speed up. And I took that advice to myself at the time. I was like, right, I want to go back into an IC role. I want to become a master at commercial sales. I want to spend the time there to be super credible so I can be a thought leader to challenge the status quo when I speak to any organization in whether it be the digital native space or the energy and utility space or FSI. They're the kind of three markets that I've worked in.
On that point too, for you, because I got reviewing the accounts that you've looked after or the territories, and almost I had a unique experience at MoveWorks where I had the whole territory. So it was I had to be a broad specialist and a niche specialist.
Which is tricky.
Which it is really tricky. And then but with your career, you've also gone utilities and you went FSI for multiple years.
Yeah.
And I can imagine the expertise you built in also all those accounts, and then therefore where you're sort of at today as well, having that leadership perspective, you almost want to be broad again when you're managing a whole bunch of folks. When you talked about ego, but it's I almost feel you mentioned that, but it's I feel like you're the least ego person in sort of how you approach leadership. But it's also the fact that you realized that in your first leadership role and went back to an IC role during that period. Do you think you'd be the leader you are today without doing that though?
Most certainly not. When I went back into an IC role, there was a few moments of change for me. I'd been working in infrastructure sales for that company called West, as I mentioned, and I'd had a touch on selling software as a service or platform as a service, selling those technologies. And I thought, hey, let's pivot and actually move into SaaS or tech sales as we kind of know it today, what you guys speak about all day, every day. And I was not an expert at all in that spot. So to answer your question, then let's touch on a few points within that. If I went into leadership selling software as a service, I wouldn't be able to be the type of thought leader that I want to be now. I wouldn't have any credibility in that space. I wouldn't be able to coach and mentor my reps, which people talk about, hey, leaders get promoted because they're the best rep. Sometimes that's true, but the most effective leaders are the ones that can, as I mentioned before, coach, not carry. And the reason they can coach really well is they can actually really focus on the sales process and the methodology within that sales process to help hold their reps accountable when reps start to drift out of that sales process. So if I was a leader who hadn't gone back and spent 3 years in commercial sales working different, industries, digital natives, as you mentioned just before, BFSI, etc., that wouldn't have set me up to then go and be an expert in enterprise, which I then did for about 4 years at DataBricks. That wouldn't have then set me up to go and be a strategic majors rep at Grafana, because each step along the way in your career journey, if you're not absolutely crushing it in that market segment, how can you expect to just quickly pass through and be an expert or be set up to be an expert in majors if you can't go and have a critical conversation with, the CTO of a big four bank, or you can't go and challenge the status quo in front of a VP of engineering at a, hyperscaler or one of those types of organization who is on the up and up. If you don't have that credibility, you don't have that capability in what you're selling, and you can't hold them accountable through a call to action. I love that saying, credibility, capability, call to action. Awesome. You can't set yourself up to be that respected leader who then can, one, hold reps accountable when they drift out of their kind of line of sight, or be someone that can be looked up to go, hey, how would you do this, Chris? And it's not about telling them, but it's about saying, hey, have you thought about it in this way? How would you approach that? If I hadn't got those experiences myself, I'd be, I suppose, a bit lost in leadership.
Totally. And that's what the account executive needs from a manager too. It's almost they want to run autonomously, but then when they get stuck, it's almost you can see the 2-3 steps ahead that we've missed potentially before
100%.
getting to that next step.
Yep.
And it's and then also when, let's say you got a meeting one of the big four banks or something like that, and it's like a commercial and enterprise rep that's growing in their career. Like those first few meetings, them going in by themselves with you as the manager or whatever the case is to support that rep, like you need to be able to hold, you need to be that leader for the account executive to learn off as well. So I think without doing that experience, you can't make your team perform as best as possible. But, we briefly chatted, and because I was kind of at a career transition myself at that point, and one of the questions I'd asked you, like, how'd you know you were ready for leadership as well? Which obviously I didn't know that background story, you'd been in that leadership role.
Yeah.
But you also, and we don't need to share numbers, but like you've done incredibly well financially in the space of overachieving in your roles.
Yeah.
And so, you mentioned to me like you were ready to like almost give back and to see other reps like smash their quota and things like that. And was basically 10 years on, you then are now a director as well, like a manager again. But what were the key points that made you feel exactly ready to take that next step now?
It was a fundamental change in motivation for me. You mentioned it, like moving to Grafana, I've had 2 career years in terms of earning. I've set myself and my family up really, really well. And that's been through, one, being surrounded by an amazing leadership team there, 2, selling an incredible product that solves real problems, and 3, obviously giving it a red hot crack myself. But what I found as I went through, I suppose, the motions of selling, these large deals to tier 1 banks, to big car manufacturers, was early in my career, if I did a 7-figure transaction or an 8-figure transaction, I'd be swinging from the monkey bars, whacking the gong, being like, look, it's all about me. How good's this going?
Yeah.
But I noticed that it was almost like a sense of relief when I would close these deals. It would say we did a deal with a tier 1 bank here, which took 22 months to get done. And this was from a cold call that I put in. They said, hey, we don't want to speak to you guys. Then 22 months later, and I won't go into the details of that. Well, maybe we can go into it a little bit later. But we finally got this transaction done with them. And I just felt this overwhelming sense of just relief and, okay, let's move on to the next one. That was an interesting pivot point because motivation for me had obviously changed. At the same time, I was mentoring an individual in our team, Matt Fraser, who's one of our, he's absolutely crushing it now, one of our biggest go-getters in our commercial space. And he's going to do really special things. In fact, he's the kind of guy that I would like to work for one day.
Yeah, that's awesome.
He closed his first new logo at Grafana. He'd been there for 3 or 4 months. And I wasn't doing a huge amount with him, but I was mentoring, giving him some I suppose, some feedback, some ideas. And he closed this deal. And it wasn't a huge transaction, but it got him off the mark. And I just got this huge sense of satisfaction that I had, even if it was 1%, helped him to move one needle across the line a little bit further. That was what got me out of bed now. And I was like, I want to do that more. And I want to do that for Matt again, but now for other individuals in his team. I want to help them get to a space that, 1, they probably can't get to themselves, but 2, how can I help them get to where I am in a shorter time window? And then I was like, okay, maybe I am ready to move into leadership. If money is not what you are motivated by, go to leadership because you will earn less in leadership. And so there is this weird pivot point where you go, oh shit, should I actually go into leadership knowing that I could be an elite IC? And I think I've over the years proven that now that I could stay in that. But if your motivation shifts and what gets you out of bed to work your 10, 12-hour days in these high performance environments is helping other people get to somewhere they can't get to, that's when you're ready. And that's why I knew, hey, it's been 11 years since I gave my first stint. Let's give this another crack. The company took a punt on me and a year in, I'm loving it, which is such a big difference from the first time I went in. And it's all motivation.
That's really cool. You mentioned at the start you had like burnout when you first became a manager.
Yeah.
And I'm keen to dig into like, there's 2 questions here. Is like, one, and for everyone listening, like you have consistently hit quota and overachieved significantly throughout your whole career.
Yeah.
How do you now manage the burnout or the stress of being potentially a manager? But how do you even like keep the eliteness or that feeling? Just like over a 10-year period, you've consistently hit quota. I don't know what it's like to have lumpy quotas or like an emotional downs and ups and things like that.
Yeah.
How have you personally dealt with that?
I've got a very supportive wife, which helps a lot because it's hard. And this is the thing that a lot of people from the outside looking in don't realize about software sales. You're a professional and you need to treat it like a professional job. lawyers are under stress, surgeons are under stress, and people think, oh, salespeople, they won't be under stress. But if half you're at risk in terms of earning is on hitting a quota, whether it be a monthly quota, quarterly quota, yearly quota, that eats away at you. Mm-hmm. For me, I think you have to absolutely set boundaries. So I think about like working these big 10-hour days, these 12-hour days. If you don't switch off at the end of the day, you will just burn out. So for me, I'm big on putting blocks in your calendar. 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock, that's time for my wife and my kids, especially my kids, because they have a bedtime routine at 7:30. I've got to get them to sleep, right? Yeah. Then I can log back on. If I'm consistently burning the candle at 100% the whole time, if I need to peak, I will not have that ability to peak. Mm-hmm. And so that's something that I'm still learning all day, every day now, because I'm the one who always wants to jump in. But the moment that you can realize that you need to leave enough in the tank so you can peak is the moment that you'll be able to maintain that high elite performance. That's my opinion anyway.
That's awesome. In terms of your career, have you been driven by like winning or by like the fear of almost like losing? And because it's like what you said, like the relief of closing a deal. It's like, I think I've experienced it so much. It's like you finally close a deal, and before it's like close, it's just all it is relief, and then you're on to the next one.
Yeah. It's I think you're kind of talking to kind of like grit and persistence, right? And for me, I grew up in a fairly low socioeconomic area. Nothing was given to me and my family. I had a really, really nice upbringing. My mum and dad and my brother and sister, but I was never one that, went to a private school or had things given to me. Very early in my life, my parents instilled in me, like, if you want to go and purchase that pair of rugby shoes or you want to go and get that Rip Curl t-shirt that you wanted to buy when you were 13 years old, like, go get a job, earn your way through. And so for me, that's always been my intrinsic motivation is I almost have something to prove to myself and also to others that I'm good enough. And so that, I think, is my underlying drive. I also love learning. Mm-hmm. And so I'm always asked, similar sessions to this, like, how do you continue to invest in your career and make sure that you're bettering yourself? I'm 17 years into this career now, and there's this great term called everboarding. And so you do onboarding in a company. Your onboarding is 3 to 6 months. If you are making sure that once you get through that onboarding, you are consistently investing back in yourself, and that might be improving your technical literacy. That might be becoming a subject matter expert in a certain industry vertical. That might be spending time to understand what's going on in terms of the industry. If you're consistently learning and consistently trying to better yourself to get to that next level, that's also maybe an indicator that you can get to that next stage, and it motivates you to want more. So for me, rolling back to what we started to talk about at the start of this pod, it's if you can make sure that you're investing in yourself, your credibility is going to skyrocket. And that's going to have a downstream impact on, one, your ability to earn, your ability to stay motivated, your ability to teach, mentor, all the things that you may want in this career.
That's awesome. I've never heard the term everboarding, and that makes so much sense. Like, obviously, I've applied it in, like, how do you get better, keep improving? But the everboarding is a great term to do that because
you can become stagnant.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely. And like, if you don't even have that terminology or a framing, I think you can get quite stuck, or you feel like you're bored or stuck. But there's so much to continuously learn as well. What would your family say, over the past couple years, say about, from an outsider looking in almost, like for other people that, maybe their spouse or their partners aren't in tech, and obviously you are in tech. What's it like for your family in terms of your work, I guess maybe the pressure or the highs and the lows and how they all experience it with you, right? Because it's like they're on the journey.
Yeah, big time. And there are highs and lows, absolutely. There's been moments in time where I'll come back from work and, I'll just kind of collapse in a heap. The trickiest thing is work from home. And this is a dynamic that the majority of my career I've actually worked from home. Grafana is 100% remote. I've been there 2.5 years. Mm-hmm. I was at DataBricks as part of that first on-ground team, and that was right when COVID hit. So I worked from home for pretty much 4 years during COVID. When I was at New Relic, it was a hybrid office situation. And even before that, I was traveling a lot when I was at West because I had a national type role. If you don't have the ability to switch off, you bring that pressure into your home life. Now, I've got young kids. I've got my home office downstairs, and say 5:30 hits and I'll finish my phone call. I open the door. I've got 2 young kids jumping all over me. If I take the stress from my world into their world, straight away it sets a really poor tone for the rest of the night. And that's tricky because typically in the past, you've been able to catch a bus home, walk home, run home, train home. And if you've had a stressful day, you can kind of like it just kind of bleeds out of you a little bit. You can time to decompress and that kind of stuff. You don't have time to decompress when it comes to working from home. And majority of tech sales roles have an element of working from home.
Yeah.
So for me, it's about just taking 5 minutes at the end of the call, understanding that these young kids, they just want dad. They just see me as dad. They love dad and fun dad.
Yeah.
If I come in and I'm not fun dad, the rest of the night is ruined. Bedtime routine's ruined. They're up at night all night. My son doesn't sleep at the best of times anyway, so that's tricky. And it's the same with my wife, right? Like for us, how do we actually make sure that we are raising a really strong family unit together? And it's about openly communicating around stress, openly communicating around how we can both be in this as a team. And candidly, to get through this last couple of years, my wife's had to step back from work. For us, that was a decision we made together. My wife had a really good career in marketing before this, but when your kids are young, you only have that one opportunity to kind of spend the time with the youngsters. And so she is doing a little bit of consultancy work at the moment, and I'm the full-time breadwinner, I suppose. And so you just kind of get into a rhythm. But the kids don't know that.
Yeah.
So you have to make it for them really consistent.
Yeah. What a beautiful opportunity that can all happen.
Exactly.
That experience
Exactly.
as well. What does it mean actually to, and maybe, this question can come from, because I think you were mentioning some gentlemen potentially in your team or whatever, like doing very, very well or smashed quota, or some people at Grafana as well. What does it actually mean for people to overachieve their number? Like sometimes it could be, let's say it's the timing or whatever, the time of the company comes into market and they're just doing really well. They got a hot product, but I strongly believe like the rep still needs to like do really well themselves as well.
Yeah.
What does it actually mean for a rep to like be at the top 1% consistently?
Yeah. So I'm always thinking about this. There's a great quote. I heard it from an Australian boxing legend, Jeff Fennick, and he says, and it's with regards to how he competes with his competition. I don't want to be 100% better than my competition at one thing. I want to be 1% better than my competition at 100 things. And the best reps are consistently investing in themselves. At the moment, the Soccer World Cup's going on at the moment. Do you think Argentina and Spain made the final just on their own skill? No, it was hundreds of hours of training, week on week, month on month, year on year, on fitness, attack, defense, skills, communication, team vibe. Everything that goes into that isn't just something that happens. It's being lucky by design, which is a great kind of framework that Grafana talk about. And it's around, hey, if I have a sales process and I need to get through a whole bunch of things and I close this great big whopping deal, great, fantastic. At the same time, have you been topping up your top of funnel in terms of making sure that you're doing consistent pipeline generation? Are you holding your qualification standards really strong? And that's the most important thing in my book. If you can qualify really strong, you're working on deals that actually have legs. You're solving a real business problem with a capability that only you can sell at a price point that makes sense. If you're just bringing pipeline through and you're working on science experiments and all these kinds of things, you're not necessarily moving the needle. So I noticed with this top 1%, they're consistent, they're predictable, and they scream credibility. And so if those three things, you see them as an asset within one person or two people or a whole team, that's when you know you've got a really high performing team.
Yeah, that's awesome. What's your take on, because working for like whether it's New Relic, DataBricks, Grafana, or very large like American companies as well, and coming into the APAC region, what's your whole take on working for America companies and that whole blend, potentially even just like the difference of cultures, and your thoughts on that?
Yeah. It's interesting because you get the Americanized sales playbook, and I think that is good to a point. What it probably discounts is the nuances of selling into Australia. And for me, champion building isn't about going and becoming friends with a client or a potential customer. It's about understanding what is the buying motivation of not one, not two, but probably 5 or 6 individuals in this process, and understanding what is in it for them to move your piece of product, service, software, whatever you're selling, through to a point that's going to get purchased. So they might have intrinsic motivation. Are they selling on your behalf behind the scenes? If you can find those champions, you can build them, you can test them. Those are the things that move the needle the most in the Australian market. And that's not really accounted for in the American sales playbook. They'll talk about champion building, but here it is so important because you can build that champion for life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really cool. I feel like in the American too, especially with when MoveWorks Right was very early days, like coming into Australia, we had no customers here, and it was almost like the like the leadership in America was just like, we have plenty of customers in America. They're not the first customer, but it's like they're the first customer in Australia. And you're going to make them feel like special in that sense.
And everyone wants an Australian case study, right? Exactly. You're selling to a tier 1 bank and they're like, oh, have you sold to CBA? You're trying to sell to NAB and you're like, no, not yet. And but we've got one from Wells Fargo over here. And they're like, great, but that's so different, nuanced. I'm Ubank over here trying to do something in the digital space. But
no, totally. What do you think the biggest misconception of like enterprise tech sales? And I think like it's so key, the enterprise tech sales, obviously double, triple, it's helping people get into tech or people that are already working at Atlassian and Salesforce and whatnot. But I think there's still a big education of people even in double, triple coming in of understanding like whether it's B2C or B2B and also like how large these deals are that we're working on. What's the biggest misconception you think other people from outsiders have on enterprise tech sales, like selling to a big 4 bank? I guess like what it takes as well.
Yeah, I think I touched on this earlier. I think that predisposition or the idea that people have of sales is just people that can go in and have a conversation with anyone and you just show them a product and technology and it's like, hey, do you want to buy this? And move it forward. I think you really need to be an expert in your industry, number one. And that's the biggest misconception here. I would much rather hire for someone who has innate curiosity, is really driven, is really, really coachable and wants to succeed as opposed to the finished or the polished product, right? And so you've got this conception that, if you're the finished or the polished product or you haven't been in sales before, I can just go in and do it. You need to be able to apply yourself to understand everything about the customer and be that subject matter expert. I want, as a seller, if I'm selling to a big 4 bank, and they're doing a digital transformation, I want to know more about that digital transformation than they know about. And I want to provide examples, proof points of other organizations that have gone through that. So they go, hey, Chris McPherson's an expert in this. I think it's important to listen to what he's got to say, as opposed to, hey, what are your challenges? Because that's so basic at the start. You need to move and gravitate over and above that to be that expert.
Yeah, you said that actually on the phone to me, and that rang a bell for me. It was like, let's say you're an enterprise or a strategic account executive, almost going into a big 4 bank. It's like you can't, maybe in commercial you'd go into like a smaller account and it's like, what are some of your challenges? Whereas like you need to go into the ANZ Bank as a thought leader and be really demonstrating that you know the space, maybe 1% more than them, or give them an interesting idea around shaping how their company could operate better.
That's it. And so you're kind of talking around like, or touching on like multi-threading and the importance of that as well, right? Like you can go into ANZ Bank and you can have a point of view, but the more powerful point of view, if you speak to, say, 20 people across different business units at ANZ Bank, you understand, is there some consistencies in the challenge that they're trying to solve for? Maybe it's a risk and compliance problem that they've got across the bank, which is really common in BFSI, right? And in sales, you've only got 3 things that you're ever really selling against, right? You're trying to increase revenue, reduce cost, or reduce risk. They're the only 3 ever, and I'll die on that hill.
Yeah. Is that how like you would then pick companies as well? Like
Let's get to that. But let me finish this one first. So if you're multi-threading and you are understanding consistent challenges across all of these different business units, and then you're taking it to at the practitioner level, then you take it to an operator level. And by operator, for the audience at home, I'm talking around like middle managers, so like directors of engineering, directors of IT, and actually saying that, hey, here's what we're hearing at the ground. Here's the 3 business problems, 1 business problem, 100 business problems that you're trying to solve for. Here's how Grafana, DataBricks, MoveWorks, New Relic, Timbuktu.com, whatever it is, can solve against them. Here's how we've done it in the past. And I strongly believe that if you do this, the output will be A, B, and C. They can't shy away because you've done all the research for them. You've showed that you're a credible resource because you've gone and brought up or surfaced all these problems. Then you can help them translate that to the economic buyer. And they're the 3 they're the 3 personas, right? Practitioner, operator, economic buyer. If you can encompass them and bring them all together and be the translator of the technology to the business problem, then you become the subject matter expert.
That's really cool.
To your question around like, how do I choose companies? Gosh, we could talk about that forever, right?
Also, just before we jump into that as well, how you described the operator?
Yeah, so practitioner,
Practitioner?
which is kind of
Yeah.
your community. Let's break it down even more basic from a tech
Yeah, because
perspective.
this is
right?
really good, and like I haven't heard it in that way. Like my old manager would say, I heard him say it the first time on a call, and we were probably meeting the operator.
Yeah.
And obviously he was probably like our champion at the time when we closed this deal. Probably didn't know that exactly at the time, but
Yeah.
like trying to figure out who the economic buyer was.
Yeah.
And one piece he would say is like, if I had a piece of string, who do I need to bring on the journey, up and down? And it said it in like, because it's always like we want to know the direct answer, but there's a polite way of sort of asking that in sales as well. And like that really helped me always frame that of like really trying to map out who I needed to bring
and
on
that's
the
what it
journey.
is. You're just trying to map out your key stakeholders in any transaction that can help you to move the needle from point A to point B. So at the ground level, we're talking your developer community, your engineers, the people who will use technology in their everyday life. That's the practitioner level. When you're in a digital native sales motion, that's where you start. It's a bottom-up sales approach. A lot of people would have heard bottom-up before.
And it's almost like the product-led growth, because it could be a
PLG, absolutely, absolutely. So often they're the people who are on the tools. They know the pain of their current estate or setup of technology. Now, I'll use the example of observability because I've been in that space for some time. And observability for everyone at home is really just monitoring the health of software and applications, right? So if you've got a mobile app that's performing really poorly, that's a really poor digital customer experience for the end user. There is 100 applications behind the interface you see. You need to know the health of those applications and how they're all stitched together. The people who use observability tools behind the scenes are the practitioners. It's not the economic buyer. They're trying to solve for the digital customer experience problem that their end users are experiencing. So if you can understand at a bottom level or build up enough groundswell around the pain points that the practitioners are using, that helps you to, I suppose, evangelize that challenge or that problem statement to their line managers and their operators, people who probably are in the trickiest roles in their career, similar to a regional director role I've got, right? You're stuck in the middle, right? It's a thankless role, and it's really tricky because you're in the middle of trying to translate board level initiatives. And so let's just use a banking example. Banks are always trying to improve their net promoter score, which is just, how likely am I to recommend Commonwealth Bank, NAB, ANZ to you, Kayla, to be a new customer? And that's on an index score. Do they think the practitioners care so much about that? They just want their technology to work, right? So these operators are caught in the middle of trying to translate economic buyers or the senior leadership team's biggest motions or goals down to the practitioner's technology that's going to essentially solve against that. So you need to evangelize at that level, hey, we can solve against this proof point. Let me help you on a journey to help translate how Grafana, DataBricks, whatever technology you're selling is going to solve against the board level initiatives. And that's where your champions are born because they're the ones that can be change agents, but they don't necessarily have the power to go and sign the check. But the people at the top, your buyers, your senior leadership team, they don't know the challenges. They just go, we've got to solve against this. It's risk or it's revenue or it's cost or it's efficiencies, which fall really within cost, productivity as well.
With you?
You need to translate, I suppose.
Yeah, totally. Because I've only had really like one experience, right, which is at MoveWorks, right? So I know how we've operated and then, of course, friends in the space. But I feel like being at three really prestigious companies of how they've operated.
Yeah.
And now being a manager, do you recommend, and it's obviously different on PLG versus like maybe it's a more enterprise motion sell. Like at MoveWorks, we didn't have POCs and things like that. So I was like, you had to buy the big thing out of the gates. But in terms of how you look at things now, would you rather your rep almost do the helicopter analogy where it's like fly to the top with the board member and then work their way down? Or is it almost like you don't mind the rep going and just like multi-threading with as many people as possible if they were, I guess, breaking into a new account? And also if you had your, I guess, a commercial AE or an enterprise AE go meet potentially the economic buyer for the first time, would you want to be in the room with them that first meeting, or it doesn't matter too much?
So answer that second question, absolutely.
Yeah.
I would always want to be in the room with the economic buyer, my rep, irrespective of their skill set, just as a show of, hey, we're invested in this partnership, in this relationship. You're not going to go and meet the CIO of a bank just as a sales rep, you're likely to have kind of like 3 or 4 in your account team. And that's an important point as well. As a seller, you are not out there on your own. There's this, it's so overused, like sales is a team sport, but it's so true. Like I've been successful in my career, not because solely of my output, but because I've got and can hold accountable my ecosystem around me, which is your sales engineer, your SDR, your marketing team, legal support, your leadership team, and everyone is, consistently on the same pathway of understanding where we need to take customer from point A to point B.
I do believe that AE is like almost the quarterback of the team, as they say.
Absolutely.
In tech.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, to your point on that, that's what we struggled with in MoveWorks, right? Let's say I had myself, the account executive, and depending on if I was walking into ANZ Bank or I was going then into like a Red Cross that was smaller, and Dan was my solutions engineer, and so we were obviously partners together in how we closed deals. But it's if Dan was also playing architect, security, and engineer, it's like, and you're walking into an ANZ Bank, it's like very hard to keep the authority of all those things, because it's like, yes, we could bring all those expertise in it, but it's like when you need someone to bring more authority or a different perspective, or just even how they articulate it in a different way, like that is what enterprise sales truly needs a part of the sales motion.
Absolutely. And sometimes that's really tricky to do, because at MoveWorks, you guys were running a really lean skeleton team. Majority of my career as well, it's been the same. Like I've had to actually be quite technically literate in a lot of conversations, because I might be sharing a solutions engineer with 2 other reps. We might have 1 SC across all of ANZ, and that person might be traveling around or in other meetings. I think that's never going to change. In hyper growth, high performance scale startups, you need to be an all-rounder. But in terms of kind of, do you go with a bottom-up approach, or do you go with a top-down approach, or do you go somewhere in between, to answer that question? There's no real right answer, but there's an advice, I suppose, that you've got, and you've just got to look at what is the type of industry that you're selling into. So for a digital native, it makes more sense to go bottom-up, because it's highly likely that let's go back to the practitioners, right? Those practitioners are more than likely, for the most part, very well versed in the technology you're selling. In fact, they might know more about the technology you sell than you know yourself, because that's just how they're wired. And often in these digital native companies, their senior executive go to the practitioners, hey, you go and choose whatever technology you want and go and bring it in. So selling to these individuals, it's a lot of community sessions, workshops, art of the possible sessions, giving them access to, hey, like, how would you design this product if you had the opportunity to do it again? It's like a voice of the customer type engagement. Once you build up enough groundswell in that digital native environment, it is then more important in that particular sales motion for you to be the technology translator to solve the business pain. Because they will have no ability, and they're great. They're so exceptionally smart, these individuals, but they are so minded and geared one way. Technology is life. They don't necessarily have the ability, except there are some unicorns out there, to translate how that technology is going to solve against their business pain. In digital natives, for the most part, it's always about revenue. How can I ship software faster in order to compete through technology to either 1, disrupt a market, 2, stay ahead of my competition, or 3, just create a really, really robust digital customer experience so I can claim that market share. They don't care so much about cost. They don't really care about risk. And so if you can understand how your technology can actually help them to move the needle, to capture new markets, which is new revenue for them, or to create that really robust, sexy product that captures market share, and you take that to their senior leadership, 9 times out of 10, if you've done a really strong business case around how you can actually move it from point A to point B, I've said that a few times in this, that's what's going to move the needle on getting that transaction done in digital natives specifically.
That's awesome. What's been your favorite industry to sell into?
Oh, it's a tricky one, because that's the most fun. It honestly is. They've got typically, pretty robust budgets.
Like you said, like go win the market and less risk. Like that sounds
fun.
Fun
It is. And often, and that's why I spent like a good 4 to 5 years of my career in commercial sales. I loved it. And you can make a lot of money in commercial sales. Hence my advice to all reps, like slow down to speed up. Enterprise isn't as sought after as you think it is. Like everyone wants to be there, But at the same time, one, you might not earn as much, but two, it's slow and you've got to have so much patience, and you need to be across so many different people. Like, multi-threading is important, but it's typically that one kind of chain of command. Like, there'd be a CTO, maybe a VP of engineering, and maybe one team lead, but they're the people that you need to speak to. You might have to speak to a digital team or a marketing team, but you don't necessarily have to go really wide across an organization. So things move quickly.
Totally.
So as a rep, it's fun. It's fun. But I spent a lot of time in that space, and they can be tricky as well because they know so much about your technology that they can challenge you a lot in that way as well. Personally, the most fun I've had has been in FSI. I love selling to banking clients. Maybe I'm a masochist, I don't know. But, and not many people will say that. But at the same time, one, I've earned a lot of money selling to banks. And that's a huge thing, a motivation at the time. Two, when I speak about kind of the top-down or bottom-up motion, it enables you to, one, build groundswell in your community, of practitioners, exactly like we do with digital natives. But two, you can also have a really strong top-down approach, which is giving you the opportunity to be that credible thought leader, to show that you are the industry expert, to be the translator of technology to business pain and how we can solve against it. And it allows you, when you're selling into those organizations, to, one, multi-thread across lots of different business units. There's institutional banking, there's merchant services, there's the retail bank, there's the shared IT services. Often these banks will also have like a digital arm, they'll have a healthcare arm. So there's 5 or 6 different business units straight away who have their own economic buyers, they have their own operators, they have their own practitioner group. And so you can create this great groundswell across so many different business units, champion build across all those different business units. And suddenly you've got in your champion plan or your account plan or however you're kind of spacing this out, 100 different people that you're speaking to all day, every day. Those people are going to go to other organizations. If you have got a really good rapport with these individuals, they see you as a credible thought leader, they have something that you've done for them. You may have solved a pain point for them. You've helped to understand their buying motivation to get them from point A to point B. They're going to hit you up when you go to your next role. Totally. And I love community. I love network. That's something of what I think is a big skill of mine, is creating a big network and making sure that I'm keeping most people on side. And selling into FSI enables you to do that.
I can imagine that experience with digital natives. So a lazy rep, I think, as they go into enterprise or strategic, maybe just want to continuously work at the top level. But when you've had all those skills of really like still enabling and empowering everyone that's actually using the technology. So I think that's an additional, it's part of your role if you have one account and everything. But I think you can also be lazy with that piece. But if you are absolutely multi-threading across the whole up and down the stack of that, but you built that muscle with the bottoms up and then the top down, like it's just...
And those FSI organizations often have a digital native arm too.
Yeah.
And so if you're only selling to digital natives and you're constantly selling against revenue, that is kind of hamstringing your ability to then go and sell against your other two levers. If you sell into FSI, you sell into energy and utilities, a regulated space, you can sell against risk, you can sell against cost. Those two are always going to move the needle faster than revenue, because getting risk out of a business, that's why there's so many successful cybersecurity organizations in the market. Risk is everything. You need to get rid of risk in your business.
Awesome. What's 2 questions to sort of round things out is, how do you know when it's time to move to the next company, and how do you look for the next company to join?
I'll keep the first one really simple. For me, there's this great saying, like, am I learning and am I earning? So if I'm still earning in an organization, that's fantastic. But if I'm not learning anymore and I'm not growing and challenging myself, it's probably time to look, because motivation has probably died off. Inversely, if you're learning but you're not earning, you've got to put some food on the table of your family. And I, as a single income family myself at the moment, that's super important to me. So that's how I would look to move. In terms of how I choose companies, it's an interesting one. So typically in my career so far, I've worked for organizations that have all been pre-IPO. They have all been in their super strong growth phase. And so immediately I'm looking for a couple of things. One, who is the institutional money that is pouring into these companies? Is it coming from private equity, Sequoia Capital? Is it coming from Andreessen Horowitz? Is it coming from Lightspeed? Is it coming from these companies that invest in organizations? Because think about how many startups pitch their ideas to these guys. And they are a lot smarter than you or I. They have teams on this. So that is a great leading indicator. The second thing, which a lot of people talk about, is total addressable market. Does your problem, does your solution solve against a wide problem set? And does that total addressable market have room to horizontally scale? Not vertically scale, horizontally, to pick up other market segments on a really strong technical roadmap. So that goes into that evaluation too. 3, what do my mentors think about it? We could talk for an hour about mentors, and it's not about having mentors just in sales. I like to have mentors in so many different parts of my life. I've got mentors that are sellers. I've got mentors who are from different industries like the legal industry, mentors who are actually some of my old customers who are technologists. What do they think about the organization? Would they purchase from that organization? Would they want to work at that organization? We can keep going along this forever, but the last one is, do you think that that organization would set you up for success in the job after that organization? So I'll end on this example. When I was at New Relic, there was a gentleman by the name of Greg Taylor, who's one of my good friends and a mentor of mine, who was the VP of sales at the time at New Relic. He went across to DataBricks, and he called me and he was like, I want you to come to DataBricks. And I was like, okay, interesting. I've only been at New Relic for a year and a half. I wasn't really necessarily looking to move. And he was like, I want you to move to DataBricks because of A, B, and C. And it wasn't necessarily for role or for money or for title, but I just trusted him empirically at the time. And I knew that DataBricks would set me up for my next role well, because they were in this really hyperscale growth market. They were going to stretch my learning capability to move into markets, not selling to just digital natives. I was going to go and work selling into energy and utilities, a space that I knew would stretch my learning to sell against risk, against cost.
Like, that is a tricky industry to sell.
It is. But so much fun when you can nail it. And that was really going to challenge me. And then the only reason that I got the job at Grafana was because of my network that I made at DataBricks. So I took a punt, an educated guess that DataBricks is on the up and up. They're probably going to set me up for my next role, and I've been fortunate enough that it has, and now I've moved into a leadership role, which is ultimately what I wanted to get into. And that was probably why I went into leadership again, because I'll be at Grafana for a couple of years, no one's at a company forever, and then that leadership role will set me up for my next role in leadership at whatever company.
Country manager next.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. That's a really big role. I'm still just trying to become a master in my craft in this one first.
That's awesome. Chris, with everything that was spoken about today, or, I did send over about probably 40 questions that we'll cover. And I
spent hundreds of hours preparing as well.
But is there anything you want to leave the guests with, or anything that you feel like we missed today that you wanted to cover?
I think we've covered a lot of areas. The piece of advice, I suppose, which I've banged on a lot about, is slow down to speed up. I think that's really important. I think absolutely mentors are key and critical. Champion building is absolutely front of mind when it comes to anything. But also something we haven't spoken about is you need to be having fun in all of these roles. And not enough people talk about like building a community within your organization and making sure that every day when you get out of bed, there's something that's motivating you. Is it learning? Is it earning? Is it giving back to the team? And for me, as long as all of those things keep ticking boxes in what I want to get out of the role, I'll absolutely keep turning up every day for tech sales. There is so much money to be made.
Could you imagine getting into another industry? Like, now that you've been in tech sales?
Well, now that we're on a podcast, I'm thinking media. right?
I think TV show number 2.
No, I know. My wife always says to me, like, oh, what would you do if you weren't in sales? And I was like, oh, maybe like sports broadcasting or something. And she was like, you wouldn't be able to get up early enough for that. So, maybe that. I think when I was going through school, I wanted to be a physio. Then I realized math wasn't my strong point. But I'm quite data driven now. So, but AI can do a lot of that stuff for you. But yeah, no. Thank you so much for having me on. This has been
No, it's been a
a lot of
blast. And I
fun.
really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. And I think anyone listening, like I know you're always hiring and or backfilling, and your career is going to continue and being in leadership roles. So I'm sure if anyone wants to reach out and have a chat, you're always willing to point them in the right direction as well of potentially roles and your mentors that are hiring as well. So really appreciate the time today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Awesome.